11, 1 through 3. Wow, everyone just cleared out when I started talking. That feels good. It gives me a lot of confidence. Anyway, Psalm 11, 1 through 3. In the Lord I take refuge. How can you say to my soul, flee like a bird to your mountain? For behold, the wicked bend the bow. They have fitted their arrow to the string to shoot in the dark at the upright in heart. If the foundations are destroyed, what can the righteous do? Let's pray. Lord, I thank you for this opportunity to share your word. I pray that you would give me the words to speak and that you would open the hearts of the people to hear. Amen. So you're probably sick of hearing me talk about the idea of home, but we're going to continue on because this is the last week, and I hope that it's meant something to you, and even if it didn't, it meant a lot to me. So this whole series has been about remembering what home really means to God, to us, and to a people that have forgotten it. I knew it was an ambitious project from the start, and that was evidenced by the fact that last week I ran out of time, and I still had about 10 to 20 minutes worth of stuff I still wanted to cover. So I apologize for that. We'll get into that. We'll talk about some of that stuff today. All of this was just really more than I knew that I would actually be able to. I thought that I would be able to do it, but I hope that you have at least gotten a sense of how we as a people, how far we have gotten from what we once were as a people and as a country, and how far we actually have to go back to get to where we once were. There's plenty of work to do, and we, the laborers, are few. But we are mighty, and the work is worth doing, and it's worth doing well. Our home is worth fighting for. So let's dive in. But please stick around to the end because we have some really spicy stuff to talk about at the end, and it's very practical and gives us some good marching orders. Let's take a few minutes to kind of open up what we've already talked about so far. Week 1, we talked about the idea of home as a gift. In Deuteronomy 6, it lays out a clear idea and blueprint of home as a place of instruction, worship, and order. This applies not to just the physical structure that we live in, but it applies to a feeling and a sense of connectedness to a people, place, an idea, and a God. In Psalm 37, it lays out the ache that the Israelites felt by being displaced from their homeland, and I hope that resonated with some of you as you feel the ache for what this country once was. Some of you are old enough to appreciate what that actually looks like. Then we talked about, I brought in Stephen Wolf's definition of what home is. Home is a place of complacent delight generated by the activity of loved ones, which adorns space with intimate familiarity across generations in order to perfect the union of a particular people and to foreshadow the union of a world to come. That idea of complacent delight means that when we are at home, when we feel that sense of home, it's just like we know we're there. When you walk in the front door at night and you're in your home, the king is in his castle, the queen and the children are there, and that's what home is. We all know what it looks like. We may not be able to define it, but we know what it looks like. Week 2, we brought in the idea of Balaam's curse. Balaam wasn't allowed to actually directly curse the people of Israel, but he did give them strategies as far as how to actually get the people off track. And that was little bit by little bit by little bit, one piece at a time. So that's when I started to trace the timeline of where we once were to where we are, and I began with the Second Great Awakening and how that idea of the Second Great Awakening and the push towards an individual, personal decision to follow God was promoted over the idea of God as a sovereign divine creature. And so it started to bring that idea to man, being a man-centered gospel versus a God-centered gospel. We talked about the camel sticking its nose under the tent and starting to work its way in little bit by little bit. And we brought in we talked about some of those early cults, Christian-adjacent religions of Seventh-day Adventism and Mormonism and Jehovah's Witness, which also led to the opening up of the idea of Karl Marx and Charles Darwin, which again started to expand these ideas beyond the world centering on God, on a divine sovereignty as the foundation of the world, and bringing more and more pieces into a man-centered idea. Last week we continued that arc by discussing what I have adopted as the idea of the Great Civil War of the West, which is not my idea. I borrowed that from several other historians that label World War I and World War II as really a battle among the great Christian empires of the past. They were cousins. The leaders of these countries were cousins. And they fought to the death, resulting in tens of millions of lives lost. The entire country, great historical landmarks, things that they write about in history books, were destroyed for all of posterity, and we don't ever get to see those things ever again. The victors, even the victors in those wars, ended up losing their soul. Their faith was replaced by progress. And the fathers, like the founding fathers of those countries, were replaced by bureaucrats and red tape. So today we're going to dive into what I was kind of getting into at the end last week. I dove into the idea of the post-war consensus, but I tried to cram a whole bunch of information into a very short period of time because I didn't manage my time well. So that's where we're going to start today. So last week we ended just past World War II, which was not as far as I wanted to get. I didn't really do it justice either, because there's so much richness in there. There's so much to learn beyond what we just even got out of our history textbooks. As I dove in, I've realized, really it is true that the victors write the history books, and they write them how they want them, and they tell you the story that they want you to know. But I'll refrain on some comments. But before I start talking too much about the post-war consensus, I want to read something to you. This is a song I heard many years ago that really turned out to be what is the inspiration for what this series has become. But I never heard this song, but once I did, I felt like it awakened something. It revealed an ache that was in my soul that I had never knew existed. And since then, it has not been quenched. I felt like I had known the message of this song my entire life. I can't quite find the origin of it, where it actually came from, because the stories are all mixed up about who wrote it and where it came from and why it was actually written. So I can't sing, so I'm not going to try to sing this song. I have a hard time reading it without getting into the tune, but I'll try my best. So imagine this being sung to an old sea shanty playing in the background and soldiers marching off to war. So it goes like this. When there's nothing left but the fire in my chest and the air that fills my lungs, I'll hold my tears and trade my years for a glimpse at kingdom come. On the other side of misery, there's a world we long to see. The strife we share will take us there to relief and sovereignty. Oh, by God we'll have our home again. By God we'll have our home. By blood or sweat, we'll get there yet. Oh, by God we'll have our home. In our towns, we're foreigners now. Our names are spat and cursed. The headline smacks of another attack, not the last and not the worst. Oh, my fathers, they look down on me. I wonder what they feel. To see their noble sons driven down beneath a coward's heel. Oh, by God we'll have our home again. By God we'll have our home. By blood or sweat, we'll get there yet. Oh, by God we'll have our home. The road is dark. The way is lost. My eyes they strain to see. I struggle forth to find a friend to light the way for me. Oh, brothers, can you hear my voice, or am I all alone? If there's no fire to guide my way, then I will start my own. Oh, by God we'll have our home again. By God we'll have our home. By blood or sweat, we'll get there yet. By God we'll have a home. Oh, by God we'll have our home again. By God we'll have our home. By blood or sweat, we'll get there yet. Oh, by God, we'll have a home. I have a hard time, like my blood starts to boil when I read those lyrics. It makes me want to go fight. It mixes my emotions are waver between an infinite sadness and my blood starting to boil. It makes me both angry and sad at the same time. It resonates on a level that it's hard to explain. And when you hear it, with the drums, yeah, I won't wax too long on that. All right, so what is the post-war consensus? Two sources that I primarily drew from for today's talk and what I've read over the years is there was an article written in the American Reformer titled, literally, The Post-War Consensus by Ben Crenshaw, and then a book called Return of the Strong Gods by R.R. Reno, both of which I would highly recommend. And if you want to dig deeper into this, they give you even more and more and more resources as you go through them. So this is just a summary of what I'm trying to get at. So following the horrors and violence and atrocities of the Great Civil War of the West, aka World War I and World War II, the world swore a single oath, and they said, never again, never again. Never again would we allow nationalism, conviction, or religion to drive men to war. Never again would we fight over truth, duty, or faith. And from that fear, the post-war consensus was born, not all at once, but slowly, over decades, through universities, governments, and institutions that believed that they were saving civilization from itself. In the American Reformer article, he said, to make the world safe for openness, the strong gods of faith and belonging had to be suppressed. The strong gods, faith, truth, family, nation, and conviction were replaced by the weak gods of tolerance, safety, comfort, and consumption. It sounded noble, even merciful. Open borders, freedom and acceptance for everybody, elevation of the individual over the group. But in trying to remove those causes of the war, the West removed the very things that gave life meaning. The very things that civilization had been built on for literally thousands of years up until that point. Strong leadership, nations, God at the center. Whittled away over the course of the next 80 years. We traded many things for other things. Religion was privatized. It became a personal hobby. Your religion, it was about your faith. It was about finding your place in God. It was about finding who you were in the presence of God. It sounds great, but it's not about who we are in the presence of God. It's about who God is to us. I went down that road myself. I tried so many times to rewrite my definition of God. I tried over and over again to try to accept things that I was doing in the face of God and those around me in the face of God. As my life spiraled out of control and my ex-wife spiraled out of control, I tried to accept behaviors that I never would have thought acceptable before, but that was my faith. So now I was trying to redefine God. Until God radically encountered me one day on the side of a highway in Colorado, and a young guy who barely knew me looked me dead in the eyes, and he said, "You still believe in God, Andrew?" I've told that story before, but I literally dropped to my knees. One of the very few times where God overwhelmed me so much with his power that I lost control and I couldn't do anything else but fall. I wept, and I realized that the God that I knew existed wasn't the God that I was trying to reinvent in my own mind. It was the God that I'd always known existed. It was the one that was taught to me as a child and all through the all years of my life. So religion, that's what I'm saying. Well, that's what I mean when I say religion was privatized. It became a personal thing. And I'm not trying to discount the idea of a personal relationship with God. That's not what I'm getting at. We're supposed to have a personal relationship with God, but it's not a God of our understanding. It's a definition of who God is. It's not subjective. It's God, who God is not up to me. It's up to God. And church, over the course of that time, church became solely based on an individual issue rather than the driver of culture and politics. All of a sudden, we weren't supposed to talk about religion at the dinner table. I don't know when that started, but I thought about that a lot too. When did it become taboo to talk about religion and politics at the dinner table? I don't know who promoted that idea, but it doesn't really make sense to me because it seems like that's the one place that we should be talking about religion and politics. At the dinner table, with the family, and with people we know and love and trust. And instead now, it gets thrust in our faces in the public eye. And people don't have the answers when they get presented with the hard questions. And maybe if we talked about that a little bit more at the dinner table, we'd be prepared for when the face hits us square in the eye. The family was politicized. Family, rather than being the building block of what we are as a country, it was reduced to an issue of policy. So people tried to make policies and procedures and laws around the family rather than, and so it was like women's rights and kids' rights and trans rights and gay rights, trying to whittle away at the sacred order that once was the family. And if you study the history of communism, one of the things that they always try to tear down is family. Over that time, fatherhood and masculinity was pathologized. Men and who they were was treated as a threat rather than a foundation on which the entire world had been built for millennia. Masculinity was now labeled as toxic, and testosterone was now the enemy. It's funny now because as the world spirals into crisis around us, people are calling for men to stand up. and to be men again, to reclaim that traditional role of masculinity. There's still plenty fighting it, but there's plenty of people who are saying, that's what we need, that's what the world needs. Public life was declared, next point is that public life was declared as neutral, but neutral ground is always enemy occupied. When all you try to do is conserve, you will naturally, over time, lose ground. Which is why I don't like the label of conservative, because I'm not trying to preserve what we currently have, I'm trying to take back what we once were. I don't know what to call myself. I'm not a Republican, I'm not a conservative, so I'm an American first Christian nationalist, I guess is what you would call me. One last thing is that stability replaced conviction. Safety was the new gospel, and comfort was the new creed. The happiness of the person replaced the safety and security of a people and place. It was more important to provide a safe haven for people all over the world than actually protect our national sovereignty, which is how we ended up with the Hart-Celler Act and people calling everyone around the world a potential American. I've heard it put that there's currently 350 million Americans and 6.5 billion potential Americans. And that statement, don't get me started. So the post-war consensus, the world thought it was choosing peace. In reality, it chose amnesia. It chose to forget who it was and how it got to that place. Suddenly, everything that had worked up until now was the enemy. And I'm not saying that the world was perfect at the time. It wasn't. It was far from perfect. But that's what the world had been, and now we're trying to reinvent it in 100 years, and it's just not going to happen. So, 5 core ideas of the post-war consensus. And I'm just going to put this in because everyone likes lists. Number 1 is that there is a new order of openness. So after the wars, Western elites built an international order, sound familiar? Around openness and cooperation, believing unity could be engineered through institutions rather than convictions. The idea of globalism began to be pushed on the entire world. Number 2, there was the suppression of what I've already referred to as the strong gods. Anything that inspired deep loyalty, such as faith, nation, or an understanding of absolute truth, was seen as dangerous. So those strong gods were subdued to prevent future conflict. Number 3, faith was privatized and the family was politicized. Christianity was pushed into the private sphere while the family became a battleground for ideology. Fatherhood, true biblical fatherhood, was redefined as oppressive and outdated. Just look at the statistics. In 1960, I believe between 70 and 75% of black households were two-parent households. What's that? Around in the early 1960s, prior to the Civil Rights Act. Prior to the Civil Rights Act, 70 to 75% of black families had both mom and dad in the home. Now, with progress following the Civil Rights Act, it's now, I believe, down around 10 to 20% of black families have both a mother and father in the home. The statistics are almost as bad, but not quite as bad in the white community. And this was the reason I choose black families, is because the Civil Rights Act was supposed to fix all of this. but they started to reward single moms. If you declared that there was no man in the home, you got more money from the government. It's sick. Number 4, like I said before, comfort replaced conviction. So economic growth became the moral compass. Virtue was replaced by safety. Safety first. That's another phrase I hate. Faith was therapy, and purpose was replaced by pleasure. It's no wonder that the videos that my Instagram algorithm is full of all of these crazy people doing crazy stunts, and everybody loves them, everybody watches them. I'm like, how is that crazy? That was literally my childhood. That's what I did. We created a racetrack behind my mom's property, and we used to go boonie crashing off-road. Just a bunch of guys and a bunch of teenage guys without a driver's license driving around illegally on private property. But then that started to be those kinds of things, those things that we grew up with as normal, started to be denigrated and treated like as toxic. Oh, we're dangerous. Oh, we don't want to teach our children these bad habits. They need to be safe. They need to grow up. They need to do all these things. All of a sudden, when I was a kid, there was first, second, and third place trophy when you competed in a tournament. And then participation trophies for anything and everything that you went to. All you had to do was show up and you got rewarded. Now, I mean, people can argue with me about that, but what does it actually teach? It teaches you basically that all you have to do in life is show up and you're going to be successful, which is not true. You actually have to try. You actually have to push yourself. You actually have to go beyond your comfort zone. Maybe be a little toxic in the process. Number five, core idea of the post-war consensus is a culture without foundations. The pursuit of openness produced a world allergic to boundaries that veered away from absolutes at all costs. The West lost its strength, not by defeat, but by dilution. All of a sudden, there was this thing such as my truth and your truth that replaced the truth. But we traded that absolute truth for tolerance and belonging for the bureaucracy. All of a sudden, no one knows what a man is anymore or what a woman is anymore. And again, this is a communist idea because they remove anything and everything that is absolute so that the state replaces those absolutes as the number one authority in everyone's lives. So that's a brief overview of the post-war consensus, but again, if you want more information, read that article in the American Reformer and listen to the audiobook, Return of the Strong Gods, because there's way more to it than that, and it's pretty vile how they actually did it. How does that apply to Scripture? Deuteronomy 8:11 says, Take care lest you forget the Lord your God. And that's exactly what happened. The West didn't fall overnight. It forgot over time. It forgot God. It forgot home. And it forgot who built its walls and who blessed its foundation. And when you forget the Lord your God, you don't just lose your faith. You lose your family, your nation, your story, and your home. Once I started to see these ideas that in the post-war consensus, I started to see them everywhere. They are pervasive. They are in every aspect of our life, from our media to our schools to our institutions of higher learning, and most frighteningly, in our churches as well. It is literally what they would refer to as in the water. It is so much a part of who we are that we don't even see it. We don't even know what it is because we all grew up in it. We all grew up in this idea of never again. And what can we possibly do to prevent that from ever happening again? We didn't live prior to that. Everything we know is after that. Everything we know is the post-war consensus. Everything we know is built around the idea of never allowing anything like that to ever happen again. And like I said before, it sounds great to not let that happen. But what have we sacrificed to make sure it never happens again? So before we wrap this up and get to a few action steps, there's one more person I want to talk about and one more story to tell. And again, not because this is the most important, but because this story is the one that started me down this rabbit hole in the first place. And because it is really evident of the entire overall arc of what we've been talking about and discussing and the war we've been fighting and losing for way too long. I stated before that really how I got down this road is I started to read books on nutrition. The first one I read was one called the cholesterol myth, which talks about the idea of the idea that high cholesterol causes heart disease. And if there were a bunch of other doctors in the room, they would probably be arguing with me about this. But I've done the reading and I know what I'm talking about. My dad, who's a medical doctor, has been a medical doctor for 50 years, is actually the one that shared this book with me and said, read it, it'll blow your mind. But I won't get into the science and what that whole book is about. But it started me down this road of cholesterol, of health, and looking into where we have come since that time. Little anecdote, when my dad was in medical school, 240 was a healthy cholesterol level. If your blood levels were 240 or less, they didn't worry about cholesterol. When I was in school, it was 200. Now they want everyone's cholesterol level below 160. And what's changed since then? Have heart attacks gone down? No. Overall health gotten better? Nope. What's gotten better is cholesterol medications have gotten better. The drugs to reduce cholesterol have gotten better, but there's been no real change in overall heart health in our country. As a matter of fact, it's gotten even worse. So where did that idea come from? And this is the guy. His name is Ansel Keys. And he didn't just come up in that book. I started to read other books, and all of a sudden he started to come up more and more and more. And I was like, who is this guy whose name keeps coming up? And why is he important? Well, I like to refer to Ansel Keys as he was Anthony Fauci before Anthony Fauci. He was born in 1904. He rose to prominence in the 40s by conducting what was known as the starvation study. You see, this was during the peak of World War II, and there was worldwide hunger and starvation all over the place. And they wanted to know the best way to treat people as they were pulling them out of starvation, or when they found people who had been long-term malnourished. So Ansel Keys set up a study, and he recruited, I believe it was 1,200 young fighting-age men, and he put them on starvation diets for long periods of time and studied the effects of that. These guys literally nearly went insane, some of them. They would eat their own shoes. They would eat their own belts. They went from these healthy specimens, these healthy young men, and the study was conducted in a small town somewhere, but people would talk about these young men that would come in, and at first they would come into the diner and they were healthy, robust young men. And then over the course of I think it was 6 to 12 months, these young men would come in and they're hunched over and they're unhealthy and their faces are gaunt and the hopelessness in their eyes. Many of them went crazy, a couple of them committed suicide, and almost every single one of them reported long-term psychological side effects. So that was how Ansel Keys rose to fame. Fame, prominence, whatever. Later on, he started to study heart health, and he was wondering why heart health in America was getting worse. And he postulated that his idea was that it was the consumption of animal fats, increased animal fats. 10 minutes? Okay, I'll speed up. Okay. Anyway, he conducted a bunch of false research. He cherry-picked, he put out what's called the 7 Nations study. What he actually did is he went all over the world. He studied dozens of nations and studied what heart health had to do with it, what their eating habits and stuff like that. And any country that didn't fit within his little parameters, he eliminated them until he only included 7 countries, the data from 7 countries that backed up his idea that animal fat and high cholesterol promoted increased heart attacks. And so over time, he promoted this idea. And at first it didn't take off, but there was enough time and money and powerful people who were behind it that eventually it became the dogma of the day. And people started to promote the ideas of vegetable oils and increased grains and starches. If you remember back to John Harvey Kellogg, promoted high grain diets to reduce testosterone levels. The crazy part about Ansel Keys is if you study where he actually came from, his original funding for his research came from a precursor of the World Economic Forum. There's more that I could say about Ansel Keys, but for the sake of time, we got to get on to a few other things. That's what brings us to what's happening in our own backyard. What happens when foundations crumble and no one guards the gates. I hope you can see what I'm talking about has wound its tendrils into each and every aspect of our life and living in our country. We have drifted or been intentionally driven from what once was home, and if I'm being honest, it's actually more that our home has been driven from us. I won't speculate on precisely who this is. I don't have the time or the place for that. What I can say is that we have a cunning and crafty adversary who is constantly prowling at the door. So what can we do? So now we're going to talk about, there's some things that are happening in our state that very much apply to what this idea that we're talking about. One of our illustrious members, Mr. Isaiah Lopez, has been doing security work up in Seattle. I believe he's not up there anymore, but he discovered some things that were very interesting that apply to what we're talking about today with the homeless population. And I don't know if you know this, but in Washington, Oregon, and California, they allow theft, shoplifting up to like $950 or $1,000 before it's considered a crime, before it's been considered a misdemeanor. And that's been promoted and pushed by our lawmakers, and it has very far-reaching effects into how it affects us today. So Isaiah collected some footage, which was very fun in our group chat when he would drop these videos on us. So we took some of the best of what we saw, specifically pertaining to what we're talking about here. We put together a little clip for you to hear. So if you want to see, move up closer, but hopefully you'll be able to hear it.
It's mostly audio.
What I see a lot of times in our store is people stealing like big chunks of meat. Why is that such a hot item to take?
Oh, because they go and sell it in Chinatown. Candy, steak, they go and sell in Chinatown to the Asians over there. They buy it for like $5 each.
Really?
The bigger ones, they get like $15 for sometimes. Food trucks and stuff that buy it. Just
And they use it in their stores then?
yeah. You see anyone coming in stealing like a bunch of clothing, like a lot of one item,
Yeah.
because they're selling it to someone. And in Tacoma, there's no way in hell they'd let that happen.
Anything that you guys see disappearing from your store
Ice
in
cream?
large quantities sells well in the store.
Okay.
The two things that most of us survive on out here is cereal and ice cream.
Wow.
Ice cream's for during the hot days, and cereal's just like a constant. You have like 12 different pawn shops that were all part of it, where people would go sell their stolen merchandise.
Oh, okay.
And they found their warehouses, and they said they found upwards of like $500,000 worth of merchandise in just one of the warehouses. And it was the same type of thing where they were finding, Tide Pods and steaks and all that normal stuff you guys see disappearing from here.
Here's a lot. Like steaks.
Yeah, they
ribs,
probably
and
sell
shit
it to
like
the
that,
rich
you know what I mean?
people.
It's mainly steaks.
Yeah.
They'll pay top dollar
That
for
is
it because
crazy
they
to
can flip
me.
it and sell it for a little bit more than you guys are selling it for, and
Yeah.
they get it half price.
They use it in the
Yeah,
restaurants,
that's what I mean.
yeah, and they cut it up to little teeny little pieces, and then one steak will make like 20 dishes.
Yeah,
They
it's
pay
just
like
big
triple
money.
the price there.
Like, they buy our food stands because they can get away with fucking only paying us $50, 50 cents on a dollar back in cash, so they
Food
get their
stands buy
products
big old
and
boxes
shit.
for hella
10
cheap
times fucking
discount
cheaper,
price.
exactly.
They
Swear to
stand
God.
in that corner
As soon
and
as
wait.
you get your food stamps,
As soon as you get
every
plus.
fucking
Really?
Other families will come to places where we go to sell things and buy it off us because then they can get it for cheap. So like on the streets, a value pack, like the multi-pack of steak, sells for $5. And that doesn't matter if it's a $20 pack or a $60 pack. It's $5. It's like tomato plants on the street, dude.
What the heck?
Yeah. It doesn't matter what it is. There's somebody that wants it that'll pay for it, and they're just happy to get it for dirt.
So what does this have to do with what we're talking about? This is what's happening in our own backyard. Does this feel like something that is safe? Does this feel like the kind of America that you want to grow up in? Like where lawmakers allow and promote this type of behavior in our country? There's more than it just so happens that the lawmakers also allow people in the same states that's the most prominent places where illegal people are able to get CDLs. And one thing that I don't think it covered in there was the fact that they found warehouses full of stolen goods and pawn shops that have thousands and thousands of dollars worth of merchandise. So there's a whole industry behind this, behind that idea. It's pretty shocking. So what can we do? What can we do? Originally, I asked Jared to come up and do a final close, but he had a prior commitment. So he gave me his thoughts and asked me if I would just read them in his place. So pretend like I'm one of the other bald guys. Pretend like I'm going to try to channel my inner Jared. My voice is maybe a little bit not quite as deep as his, but anyway, I'll see what I can do. Let's face the facts square on. If we keep doing what we have always done, the way we have always done it, we will continue to get the results we have been getting. We are not conquering institutions and failing to make disciples of the nations, something we were commissioned to do. Jesus has already saved us. It is up to us to conquer institutions, supplant corrupt magistrates, and cast down spiritual forces in high places with the guidance and empowerment of the Holy Spirit. To that end, we must reverse engineer what it would take to accomplish a win, and then pursue this win with multi-generational patience. May God have mercy on our souls. May God have mercy on our grandchildren to the 4th, 5th, and 1,000th generation. Amen. It has become apparent that the single most potent weapon is a truth told well. The enemy, manifesting in institutions, cliques, cults, and individuals, absolutely hates the truth in all of its manifestations. A special hatred is aimed at anything that exposes the depravity of hateful anti-Christian bigots. In order for our community we disgruntled few. In order for our gaggle here at Steadfast Church to move into decisive, coordinated efficiency, we must mature into our chartered potential. To that end, I assert that, and he gave 3 steps. To that end, I assert that our next step is the formation and implementation of programs which support dynastic momentum. And he asked me to write on a whiteboard to make sure everyone got it. Dynastic programs. These programs must be identified by men and women in this congregation. And Jared said he will be taking this step in his sermon series, which will be starting in January. The second step would be the reorganization of Steadfast Media with specific products and campaigns in mind. Some of the elders have been working on this since early summer. By the grace of God, significant progress has been made. Some campaigns have been tentatively identified. Torch, which is a zine or a publication, has already been funded, built, and launched. And if you would like to know more about this, he said talk to Phil. So step 2 is media campaign. Okay. And Jared hopes that to kick these things off by March of next year. The third step is carefully coordinated culture jamming. This consists of disrupting the enemy's propaganda and dismantling a consensus mirage. Remember post-war consensus? Protests, posters, stickers, signs and wonders, these will be our tools. The elders and deacons have yet to define the boundaries and techniques that Steadfast Church will employ, but we are formulating these ethics, and this will take wisdom, and by God's grace we'll have it done. Please pray for us as elders of Steadfast Church. Jared hopes to kick this off by August of next year. Propaganda and culture jamming. Yes, my handwriting is terrible, but you get the idea. And that wraps up our discussion of home. By God, we'll have our home again. And these are the things that we can start to do now in order to work towards that. We have some specific steps. We know who we are. We know what our target is. So let's go make it happen.